It's a Wednesday, it's time for Going Green. Now, Cape Town managed to avoid becoming the world's first big city to completely run out of water. But a group of academics is now looking beyond day zero to see what lessons can be learnt from the Cape Town water crisis. A year after the height of the crisis in 2017 and 2018, they've launched an initiative to document and capture key findings. To discuss, we're joined by Professor Gina Ziervogel from the African Climate and Development Initiative at UCT. Professor, I hope I said your name correctly there. So your unit is involved. Tell us about this initiative.
Thank you. So, as we can hear from what's happening in Beira, Mozambique, extreme events really can be quite devastating. And what happened in Cape Town was a different nature, and it was a slow onset event. But what we need to do is learn from these events. And so these kind of climate events, disasters, are going to happen more and more frequently, as we know in the context of climate change. So how do we understand what's happening, reflect on what happened, so that we can do things better next time? So at the ACDI, the African Climate and Development Initiative, we've worked with a team of people to build a drought response learning initiative. And the first phase of this is actually to capture interviews on film of a number of people, and we've got 30 so far, who were intimately involved in decision-making around the drought. So people from the city of Cape Town, a few academics, people in business, people in NGOs, who really were at the heart of thinking about how best to respond. And we've got these captured on beautiful film done in a film studio so that they can be publicly available on the website on what we call the Drought Response Film Library. And what's so exciting about this is that enables us to share this knowledge with people around the world and with people in our own city. So as researchers in universities, we are frequently trying to research and understand what has happened. And as an academic at UCT, I've been already contacted by many researchers internationally asking if they could speak to me to try and understand what happened. And it's demanding, and that's happening to many people who were in decision-making positions as well. So this library gives many people access to information around different people's perspectives. And one of the things we see that's really important is suddenly, a year, 2, 3 years on, the story changes so much. So these interviews that have been captured now as we're coming out of the drought help to preserve how we thought about things while things were fresh in our mind, and that's really important for us.
So apparently this is 50 hours of footage, so it's comprehensive already. So you're saying you're just putting that out there rather than trying to tell people what to think, rather than putting out a set of conclusions.
Exactly, and what's important is that different people have different interests in trying to understand what happened. Some people are interested in more of the technical responses, what was put in place in terms of water management, how much water was in the dams, when did restrictions come in. Other people want to know, well, what was it like to live in a city that was about to have the taps turned off? What were people thinking? How were they going to cope with this? Other people want to know, well, how was the governance of the crisis unfolding? Who were the players involved? How did politics come in? And all those types of points are touched on because we have such comprehensive interviews. So one person would have been interviewed for a few hours, and that's edited to put together a very beautiful package of an hour, let's say, of that person's story. And what's also important is that these interviews have been indexed and key points from the interviews have been captured alongside this beautiful video footage, and so that people can quickly see the kinds of points that each interviewee covers, and so they can find the things of interest to them quite quickly.
I like this idea that it's a system. You need a holistic view. Nobody understood it in its entirety. So you say you need all these different perspectives. But are there contradictions in all of this?
I think there are different stories. There are different ways that people experienced the drought, that people experienced the impact of the drought, and there are different ways that people understand what did happen and what might happen. And so what's great with these interviews is those individual perspectives come through. And so yes, in some areas there are contradictory points, and that's what we actually want to capture, because there is no one story of the drought. there are many stories, and actually in this world going forward of complexity where we need to understand how we respond to complex problems, we need to understand these different perspectives and that there are going to be contradictions.
Can you comment as an academic on your view, how close was Cape Town to day zero? Because some people say that that was a rallying point, it prevented it. Others say you needed that rallying point. Maybe it wasn't as desperate as the politicians made out.
So I think when day zero was on the table in January 2018, things were desperate. And for a city who didn't want to cut water off, they were planning quite carefully. And so given their planning, if people didn't reduce water and if they didn't get more water into the system, then the taps would have to be turned off. But given the response from the citizens of Cape Town, that was really remarkable. The amount of water that people were able to cut down and save during the drought was what saved Cape Town. And on top of that, various groups came to the party. The agricultural sector reduced their water use. There was cooperation between groups, between politicians and officials, and we really saw things work for the best. But in another context, it might not have been the same, and things might have ended quite differently. So it was a close call, but it's taught us a lot of lessons that we really need to reflect on so that this doesn't happen again. A
lot of people are saying that a mindset needs to change in South Africa, maybe even in the world, around water because of its scarcity. Could this project contribute to that?
Definitely. I think what we've seen in Cape Town is that mindsets have changed of so many people, both within local government trying to manage the issue, citizens at home, and people are no longer relying on just turning on the taps and thinking water's going to come out of it. They understand a lot more about the water system. That yes, we need pipes to bring water from the dams to us. We need alternative water sources. But we also need to think of water differently. We need to capture water where it is. We need to have water-wise gardens. And that kind of thinking needs to become more widespread. And I think it's only just starting to happen. But in Cape Town, I think we actually have made significant progress on changing that thinking.
Does it last though? So I know a lot of Cape Townians still feel guilty to have a shower, but months, years down the line, do we forget easily?
I think people do forget quite easily, but I think because this was such a dramatic event, some behaviors will have changed permanently. And people have changed how they garden, for example. People have changed some of their behaviors that are not going to go back. For example, when I turn on the hot water tap, I catch that water in a jug and put it next to the sink and don't let it run down the sink. And in 5 years' time, I'm still going to be doing that because now I understand that that's water that I need to use and not let run out to sea, which really doesn't make sense.
Can this help other cities with the big things like the reservoirs, the systems, the kind of pipes we're using, the kind of technology? Is that knowledge hidden in there?
Absolutely. So I think one of the things that happened is there were tremendous progress made in terms of technological responses. So the pressure management of the Cape Town water system was already in place before the drought, but during the drought, they really ramped that up and understood how that technology could be used to reduce the amount of leaks and the amount of water used in the system. So that learning needs to be shared. And there are other parts of learning that can also be shared. So the question is, how do we share that? The Drought Response Learning Initiative is one way we can do that because we've got some of these people on film who talk about some of these responses. So if there's an engineer in another city, they can listen to one of our engineers talking about bulk water supply and how they managed it. I think we've also seen shifts in how our water managers have thought about water because we did used to get most water from dams in Cape Town. And now we're starting to explore sources of water that are not so reliant on climate variability. So groundwater, for example, desalination is a long-term option that is being looked at. And as climate change starts to become more and more real, we can no longer rely on climate variability and rainfall for our water supply sources. And so thinking of these alternatives is really important. And Cape Town almost got caught out, and now they're putting plans in place to really think about how to do things differently. And hopefully this lesson will be learned by others who are highly reliant on rain-fed water as well.
So Professor, this is a fascinating initiative. My final question, because maybe it could be replicated, but who's paying for it?
Yes, so it's a difficult thing to fund, and because of the high quality of films, it has been quite an expensive project. But what's been great is that we've had a whole lot of corporate sponsors who have really believed in this project. And so they've all put bits of money in that have contributed to this first phase of making sure that we capture these lessons. So we've got 7 sponsors already of companies who are interested in this, both locally, who feel that it's really important to learn here, and there are a few of the companies who have sponsored this who work globally, who are really excited about capturing this as a new way of both capturing, sharing, and learning, and they want to share these lessons internationally with their network. So we are looking for additional funding, but this first phase has really been supported by corporates who felt the impact of the drought and can see how important it is to look long-term ahead and learn these lessons.
All right, thank you so much for your time. So documenting Cape Town's brush with Day Zero, the power of film media. That was Professor Gina Ziervogel from the African Climate and Development Initiative at UCT.